Now, the war in Ukraine shows no signs of slowing down. The White House has announced new estimated casualty figures from Russia's winter offensive in Ukraine. It says that Moscow has suffered more than 100,000 casualties since December.
That's a big figure, asserting on how the number is a key signal that Moscow's effort has been backfired. White House National Security spokesperson John Kirby told the reporters that the estimates were based on U.S. intelligence, which included 20,000 Russians killed in action. According to the newly declassified intelligence reports, half of them belong to the Wagner mercenary group.
Now, Kirby further said that Russians have made some incremental gains in Bakhmut, but that has come at a terrible cost. On the other hand, Ukraine's defenses in the region remain strong.
For Russia, this attempted effort, particularly in Bakhmut, has come at a terribly high cost. Russia has exhausted its military stockpiles and its armed forces. And since December alone, and remember now, some of the shelling and fighting over Bakhmut goes well back before December, but just since December, we estimate that Russia has suffered more than 100,000 casualties, including over 20,000 killed in action.
Kirby said that he was not giving estimates of Ukrainian casualties because they are victims here and Russia is the aggressor.
Meanwhile, the Ukrainian military has said that it is locked in a position struggle as fierce fighting continues to rage on in Bakhmut. Further adding that Kiev has been able to push back Russian forces after a series of counterattacks.
Russia's defense ministry on Monday said that its forces had carried out missile strikes overnight against Ukrainian military sites, which includes weapon depots and ammunition factories. Now, for more on this, we are now being joined by Lieutenant Colonel Daniel L. Davis, a military expert and senior fellow for defense priorities. He is joining us from United States, from Virginia. Thanks very much, Colonel Davis, for speaking with WION.
Thanks for having me.
Colonel Davis, the U.S. intelligence talking about just incremental gains that have been made by Russian forces, but the casualty figures are quite startling. 20,000 killed in action, 100,000 casualty figures. Where does this leave Russian war machine and their personnel?
Well, I think we got to take those figures with a grain of salt because a lot of those are very difficult to ascertain, and unless they have some kind of secret line into the Kremlin where they get that, they're going to be just difficult estimates. But what I really go by is what you see on the ground. And there's one thing I think people need to understand, that there are different kinds of combat operations and different kind of objectives. One objective is to try and seize territory and try to win cities. But there's another one that's focused on destroying the enemy armed forces. And for all the casualties that Russia has, and I'm sure that the number is quite high, whatever it really is, they have also exerted a tremendous casualty count on the Ukrainian side, both in Soledar and in Bakhmut. And the key problem is going to be for Ukraine is that many of the troops that they had earmarked for their spring or summer offensive have been lost in Bakhmut. And it remains to be seen whether they still have enough to go on the offensive. And we should probably find out pretty quickly, I think.
Right, absolutely. I think also what is important to understand here that Ukrainian military has said that it's locked in a position struggle. One, how do you assess the situation in Ukraine at this juncture? And also, how do you assess the role of the international community when it comes to the war in Ukraine and finding a solution for this?
Yeah, in terms of the Ukraine side, they have, like I said, suffered significant losses throughout this whole conflict. And it is just like the Russian casualties have gone up to some number since December, so too have the Ukrainian side. The problem for the Ukrainians is that they don't have as many people to draw from as the Russia does. Russia has millions more that they could draw from. So if the sides get into an attrition battle, that plays overall into the formation or into the benefit of the Russian side because they simply have more of everything to expend. Now, when we get into this offensive, there's a compounding problem for the Ukraine side is that they have just received the majority of all this equipment that the West has been promising for months. And so they've had very little time to actually train on it. And most of the people now, according to many of the Western intelligence sources, are people with barely any military experience. And they're going to be asked to do the most difficult offensive operation, which is to go against a defense that's dug in, and Russia's dug in throughout this 1,000-kilometer front with almost no air force and limited artillery strikes, and in the most complicated, coordinated fashion. So the ask of the Ukraine is much more difficult than people seem to recognize.
All right. Well, Lieutenant Colonel Daniel L. Davis, thank you so much for joining us on this broadcast with your insights on this.
Thanks for having me.
Perspectives there from Colonel Davis on where the situation stands as far as the war in Ukraine is concerned.